All right, looks like I'm live. Hey, it's Bill Patton again, and a couple of news and notes before we get going. But today's topic is going to be uh, the courage to change, and so question mark. What? Huh? Interesting. Is it necessary? What's going to happen there? What does it require? Courage? I don't know, but we'll get into that in a second. But number one, I have been invited to speak to USPTA San Diego at their member lunch coming up December 14th. So if you happen to be in Southern California and you want to come down to San Diego, hang out, have lunch, and I'll be presenting on my visual system for uh, the phasing of vision throughout a point. Um, it sounds super complicated, but it's actually not. And there's a lot that happens there in your brain that you don't even really account for, but you can kind of intentionally do a few things. We'll get into that more later. Anyway, so, um, and then also, I think what I'm also going to do is bring my foam balls, the Martin Baroque foam balls that I have the exclusive right to sell in the United States. But anyway, I'm going to bring those, and those are going to blow people's minds. Um, and lately, I've been encountering this same issue where, um, I present things, and then the onus is on the person who's receiving the information to decide if they're going to make a change or not, and how much of a change are they going to make to what they do. Um, and this takes me back to social psychology during my undergrad, because there's a term for when leadership comes in to make changes, and you know one of them is tame shift, and the other one is risky shift. And I think there might be something in the middle, but I'm not particularly impressed with anything in the middle. But um, so whereas making a tame shift is good if you're already an established leader and you don't want to all of a sudden upset things, that's fine. You just when you're making a tame shift, it's just going to take a while to get where you're going. So it's like turning an aircraft carrier. It's going to take a considerable amount of time for that amazingly large vessel to obey the rudder. Um, and then there's risky shift, and generally, I recommend this to most people who take over an organization to try to make the riskiest shift that they can make immediately, to try to change the culture of whatever they're doing, um, put new systems in place, you know, all sorts of things like that, because you want to get that pain over with as quickly as possible. So that would be you know, like a little boat, that you can just turn on a dime. So, but it's interesting to me that I hear back what people say about what I'm teaching about the visual system, and I'm not hearing the same thing back that I was teaching. So, um, it's pretty interesting. And one thing I've noticed, and I think a lot of you know this, that one of the true fundamentals of playing good tennis, period, outside of any category, is reading the ball coming out of the strings of the opponent. And a lot of people think they do that, but they don't really. And it's definitely not a point of emphasis in the teaching of tennis, because so the vast majority of tennis instructors are so focused on the technical aspect of how do you produce the stroke that they omit seeing the ball, which, to me, that's an emergency. Uh, so so one time I took over the directorship of a club, and the former director was going to become staff, which I wasn't a big fan of that, but the club really wanted that director to be able to stay on. So I said, okay, that was kind of a condition of my employment. And I had, two other people on staff, and, you know, and it's funny, they wanted to know what was my agenda going to be. But, in that situation, I couldn't afford a risky shift. I went with a tame shift because what I really wanted to do was spend a couple of weeks listening to the people, doing a lot of listening to all the members, and getting in touch with people who hadn't been at the club much, um, and finding out what was keeping them away, those kinds of things. So much more tame shift in that. But even in my tame shift, um, my staff got very upset with me. It was very interesting. So we'd have a staff meeting, and we do a little bit of training, and and then the former director got indignant with me, and he was like, well, when are you going to share with us your agenda? And I'm like, well, I just finished my second week here, and I don't think I've gotten all the information. So we're going to go with status quo. You just keep doing what you're doing. I'm not going to make any major changes until I've had a time to really think it through, right? So anyway, as a result of that, because they couldn't handle tame shift, um, the former director pretty much up and quit on me on a Friday. He told me he wouldn't be in on Monday. So that was kind of bizarre. So he forced then me into more of a risky shift, because now I had to take on, everything he was doing. And then, as it turned out, the other staff member just wasn't really a team player, wasn't going to become part of a collaborative team experience. So I actually let him go, and then actually more of a non-renewal of contract, because his contract had come up. But so now, in strangely enough, in an effort to perform tame shift, and not having the willing and collaborative staff to be able to pull that off, it put me into risky shifts, which in a way was good, because it allowed me to make pretty massive changes to the program. So for the first time, we had like a really nice red, orange, and green program that grew very quickly. We pulled back on a junior program that had a lot of very poorly behaved kids in it, that many of whom were not members, and so we made a lot more space for the junior kids that were members of the club, right? But if we go back to the visual training thing, because so many coaches are locked into this is the way I do it, and they're so focused on the technical aspects of how to hit a tennis ball, and then when presenting to them, a couple of college players who immediately improve, like I was on court following Michael Joyce, which that's a tough call. Michael is one of the great coaches in the world. And so here I am following him, and I'm like, oh man, what if I bomb, right? So I follow Michael Joyce. He's just worked with one kid who's a 10 and another one who's a 9, right? I mean, they're good players. So the 9 is sort of struggling, but Michael, helps get him to be able to hit with the 10 well enough to present, and improves them. And I'm thinking, oh man, what am I going to do? But then in presenting the visual training system with them, it was actually, I was extremely pleased that I felt like they improved even more during my time. So, and the effect on people, who were watching this, because I think there were like 75 pros at this USPTA SoCal thing, they were receptive to it. And yet it's funny, because there are 5 aspects to it, and yet I'm going to assume that maybe half the audience would be able to take home like more than two of those points, and then some, maybe one, and maybe they don't, maybe they make it their own and it comes out differently. And then, there's always kind of like this subsection of people who just are so set in their ways they're not going to do anything. But the visual system is actually a fairly radical departure from the way tennis is normally taught. And you can see my book is up in the corner there. And I do highly recommend that you read that. Now, the next book that's coming out is on net play, and that's really kind of the core of what is inspiring this talk. Is that when is that as I'm getting towards the very nitty gritty, the very end of preparing that book, I realized that I didn't have a pithy quote for every chapter. So I was like, okay, I gotta do some searching for pithy quotes, right? So anyway, one of the subjects I was like, quotes about making a change, quotes about moving forward, quotes about having a growth mindset. And I stumbled on this one page that just had all sorts of great quotes. So, because part of what it takes to get somebody to leave the baseline and go to the net is they have to change their mind about how much risk they're going to accept, right? Because even though the best winning percentages in tennis are at the net, okay, even though the best winning percentages in tennis are at the net, and actually serving and volleying produces the number one winning percentage of any tactic in tennis, any single tactic. Okay, right? That's Craig O'Shaughnessy, and I know some of you just go, you hear Craig O'Shaughnessy, and you're like, and if you're that, then you should just hang up right now because you're just not a believer. But anyway, so it still takes this feeling of risk, because when you fail at the net, and you will, because you will miss a volley and you will get past cleanly, it's immediate pain that is felt, even though those two things don't happen as frequently as you hitting a winning volley and they will miss their passing shot. So I'm realizing that part of the sales job of selling people on the idea to go to the net is to inspire them to make changes and to be brave about these things. But now, if we dig a little deeper into the concept of change, change is the only constant. So you are changing, you will change, you will be forced to change. So I think instead of thinking as something that's courageous, I would say it's actually smarter to just be proactive about it. Since change is going to happen, do you want it to be forced on you? Or do you want to be ahead of the game and start making changes and looking ahead? So, as a lot of you know, I live in San Diego, and if you happen to be in town, let's hang out. Come on out. We can hit a few balls, and if you want some one-on-one training, that's available too. So you're invited to do that. But one of the things I really like about this place is that the leadership, by and large, is pretty forward-thinking. This city is supposed to grow by 20% by 2030, right? And that's like 7 years away. So what are they doing? They're building a lot of stuff. So, like for instance, the airport, I think is going to be almost twice as large, and it needs to be because a lot of people are going to be moving here, coming and going. And so, San Diego is a growing tech hub. It's a growing travel hub, and it's that forward thinking of, okay, seeing what's coming down the line and preparing and getting ahead of it. That's really important. If I go back to my staff and how they pretty much crashed and burned underneath me, which is too bad because I tried to encourage them. I tried to get them to be patient and wait and whatnot. But I distinctly remember one meeting where I said, "Hey, I asked the question, do you get your players to rally in the first lesson?" And they looked at me like incredulously, and I was like, "Yeah." I mean, I told them, "Look, every single player who comes to me will rally in the first lesson." And that's very important because that's largely what people want to do. That's what's going to have them feeling successful, is if they rally. But what do coaches do instead? They send messaging that, until your forehand and your backhand are perfected, you don't have permission to rally. So I had a guy. So anyway, that made both these guys angry. They thought I was arrogant by saying that. I'm like, you know what? Come observe me teach sometime, which they never did. So it's a bizarre kind of a thing. Keep in mind this. I mean, this is some stats that I got from on court, off court, probably 20 years ago, and I've really lived by this. But 80% of the people who play tennis simply want to rally with a friend for 30 to 40 minutes, work up a sweat, and go home. Right? Maybe they'll play some points for fun. I don't know, but they're not too engaged in the competition. They just want to get some exercise, and tennis is a great way to do that. Then about 15% of people want to be able to play socially and not be the worst on the court. And if they win, fine, that's better. That's more fun to win. But if they lose and they play okay, then they're not particularly sad about losing. And then about 5% of people are that lunatic fringe, and they're going to join leagues and they're going to be in Flex League and USTA League and on the ladder and play for their teams, at high school. And those are your competitive players. And it's actually pretty small group, but a lot of coaches out there, I hope it's not you, cater entirely to that 5%, and they're missing out on the 95%. So there's a lot of lesson income to be made there. There's a lot of community to be built. And I'll give you one last hot tip because I'm going to be wrapping up pretty quick. So I don't know how I saw this, but there's this tennis coach in LA, and I was looking at his profile on Facebook, and he had all these links to Meetup on them. And so he promotes his clinics on Meetup. And so a couple of weeks ago, I signed up for Meetup, and within like 3 days, I had 40 people who had joined my group. Now they joined the Meetup group, the social media Meetup group, right? And currently, I think I have 120 people, and it's only been like 5 weeks, so 120 people. And what they're doing, they're allowing me to market to them. So what I market to them is Super Saturday. This is an idea that I got from David Smith, who's an amazing pro. He's a master pro with USPTA. And so Super Saturday is a really awesome format because where I do it, it's $10 for 3 hours or 15 on the day of. So people pay $10. They get 3 hours of court time. It's largely very social. They play a lot of social doubles. So this guy comes on Saturday, and this happens a lot. I get a lot of people who come in and they go, "Oh yeah, I was taking lessons at this other place. It was expensive. The messaging was, until I can hit the ball really well, I'm not allowed to play." And I'm like, "Okay, come over here. Let's toss a few. Let's have a little micro rally. Let's go short court. Okay, look, we're rallying. Oh, look, here's another player here. Let's get you two playing 11 pointers." and he's playing. He's playing 11 Porters. He had a little bit of a sore shoulder, so we made sure he didn't serve, but we let the other guy serve, and he got to work on his return game. And then I'm like, hey, coming back next week? He's like, for sure. All right. But that's probably a massive shift from where you're at right now. If it's not, good for you, you know. So that's really a great thing. So anyway, so think through what you want to do, you know, and start thinking about how you're going to make changes to what you do to be forward thinking and get things going. So anyway, that's it for today. And you know, the book is going to be out soon. If you're in Southern Cal, come on down December 14th. It's a Thursday at lunchtime, and I'm going to be putting on a 1-hour presentation, and I think there are going to be some people hitting some balls too. The location has not been decided yet. It might be at Balboa, or it could be at La Jolla Beach Tennis. All right. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. I'm going to try to do this more often now that I don't have house guests. Let me get this done.